In the fall of 2018, we released a Halloween event with a brand new AI for bots in World of Tanks. It was among the first attempts to make PvE. There was the summer event after that, and there was the Halloween event last year, which was supposed to be the next step. It's worth mentioning that the main direction of the Kiev office is artificial intelligence in World of Tanks. We created and polished it, and it was the point where responsibilities met, creating new PvE gameplay for World of Tanks and artificial intelligence. At this juncture, a new iteration of Halloween was supposed to appear with a brand new gameplay loop, a far deeper one. When we thought about the visual aesthetics and the general mood of the game mode, we had several sources for inspiration: the Chernobyl miniseries, the works of Hans Geiger, and of course the Silent Hill games. We had the idea to create a work of horror, but with tanks and other vehicles. At some point, we saw a post from Masahiro Ito, the art director for Silent Hill 2, where he said that the Pyramid Head's helmet was inspired by the King Tiger. Turns out, he's a fan of World War II military equipment in general, especially the Soviet and German tanks from the Eastern Front. So we thought, oh, it's just the thing we need. And we messaged him. This is how our collaboration started. The art team learned that we would be partnering with Masahiro Ito, who is one of the creators of the Silent Hill universe. We had some fans from the Silent Hill series who started to draw sketches inspired by this right away. The sketches were really creepy. There were tanks wrapped in skin with some organic inserts, with some metal parts sticking out of them. It looked amazing. But when we considered it, we thought it was probably a bit too much. By that time, we'd received sketches from Masahiro Ito himself, who had a bit more of a traditional view. He thought that it would be too much if there were too many paranormal parts on the vehicles. So he created a pretty traditional-looking concept based on late German tank building. Our guys were already unstoppable at that point. They started trying to add a pretty large amount of paranormal Silent Hill-like things into the project. So we wanted to meet somewhere in the middle in that regard. So we added to Ito's concept from our side. It was some sort of a compromise between a totally realistic vehicle and a vehicle with some elements of the unknown that would remind us of the Silent Hill world. The major premise for our collaboration was that I had been working for Silent Hill. So I tried to come up with a way to decorate vehicles with the Pyramid Head and other iconic elements from another world in Silent Hill. That's why I equipped the event vehicles with barbed wires, an omnipresent symbol for another world, while slightly deforming them into a geometric pyramid-like figure. I didn't want to design vehicles that are too unrealistic. The designs of vehicles in World of Tanks are highly accurate and impressive. So I made my best effort not to distort its reality. In the new Halloween event, we wanted to create a new map, or rather take on one of the PvP maps and modify it a bit. But in the end, we modified it so much that it became unrecognizable, and we finished it off with the so-called phases. Visibility decreases, enemies become stronger, the threat grows. One of the challenges was to make every consecutive stage noticeable. We took the Serious Sandstorm as a reference. In the first stages, it's pretty light, but in the last one, you can only see up to 120 meters. In terms of effects, Halloween 2020 is like 1.5 games in itself. I mean, it's like World of Tanks times 1.5. Auras, energy spheres, and effects for picking up and collecting. The effect of appearing enemies. They are weaved from darkness. We created special negative light sources. As I said, the guys couldn't be stopped in their creativity. So negative light sources are crazy. When we started prototyping, we understood that we lacked some sort of constant menace that would stalk us all the time. We didn't have something that would make the players move faster, be more efficient, and plan their routes and actions. So we came up with a so-called shark. It had to scare the player and show them that the threat level is rising, but it must remain something daunting. Something that, when encountered, you don't know how to deal with, and basically your only option is to run. The current boss mechanics were developed based on all that. The laser beam was added to it for the player to fear when they saw the beam shining somewhere, moving around the vehicle near them, or on their own vehicle. They feel an adrenaline rush, and this mechanics works well. The huge size of the vehicle was implemented mostly because it actually rams the players, and the players should have no doubt that if the thing rams them, it will result in their complete destruction. The vehicle itself turned out to be very interesting, something between the concept of the E-79 and the E-100, but in a sort of a large ship-like caliber. So it turned out to be sort of a land cruiser. Apart from the task of creating engaging gameplay, game events with AI-controlled enemies always set a certain goal for designers: to create enemies that will be different from anything a player could see in random battles. We wanted to create enemies that would behave in unexpected ways, and in general, create mechanics that would seem rational in World of Tanks, but give the players a new experience regardless. And I have to say that we now have 6 or 7 different types of bots in the game mode, and a whole set of various gameplay behaviors that changes depending on the game situation. And we actually don't know what type of enemies you will get in each session. Nobody knows. We managed to create considerable variety that allows you to experiment. Sometimes your tactics will be successful, but in other situations they will fail. So Halloween is sort of the current peak of the bot development. It's a new milestone for us. Halloween 2019 was the first event where we wanted to introduce some narrative elements and tell a story. Not just tanks driving around the map to destroy bots and bringing resources to the collector. We wanted to allow the player to dig deeper, and with some hints and pieces of the general narrative, let them understand that nothing is so simple here. And the player would see just a fragment of the whole picture that includes some other game modes like Steel Hunter and The Last Waffenträger. It's a lot of short stories, but we can't develop each of them fully during one small limited time event, as opposed to a whole large-scale game. But when all these stories become links in one chain, some small elements in one large puzzle, then all of them as a whole can tell a great story and have a great deal of meaning. We broke the whole story of Mirny-13 down into little pieces and hid them in fragments, or as they are called in the game mode, testimonies. Pieces of information will be available as you go deeper into the game mode. The more you play it, the more pieces of information you can collect and put together your own version of what is going on there. One of the most important elements of the Halloween mode, I think, is the soundscape. We wanted to create a feeling of traveling into a parallel world, that we are submerging deeper into this inconceivable anomaly by going from phase to phase. Ambient sounds, shots, all that has to be different from the usual sounds in random battles. Additionally, the most important sounds in the game sound completely different in each world. Your vehicle, enemy vehicles, and the shots themselves, of course. In the first world, the sound creates some tense feeling. But at the same time, it's not really scary. But in the fourth world, we created such sound as if we were in some paranormal world. Like the physics of sound is completely different. Apart from the soundscape, we created the music, the main theme that plays during map loading. The task was not to simply create a Halloween mood, not some light magical atmosphere like in Hogwarts, but to create a sense of desperation, tension, and the character of the anomaly. And we created the garage music in collaboration with Akira Yamaoka. During the development, we sort of had the stars align for us. We could collaborate with Masahiro Ito, and Silent Hill was kind of all around us. And we had already worked together with Akira Yamaoka, who is the very talented composer for the whole Silent Hill series. At some point, we decided to contact him and ask to write a track for Halloween. Well, I understood I was expected to create in-game music for a special Halloween mode in World of Tanks, because I've been the chief sound producer for the Silent Hill series. I first tried to create a dark, inauspicious sound atmosphere that would remind of Silent Hill. But in the course of the work, I realized that my sounds had become too horrifying. So I kind of eased frightening effects a little. You know, World of Tanks is a realistic game that features armored combat vehicles that actually exist in our world. However, the Halloween mode is based on a fictional story veiled in a highly imaginary atmosphere. I'm sure that the players will enjoy immersing into a new world created by these two extremes. During development, something happened to us. We fell in love with what we created and lost control over the scope to some extent. We made creativity and design the main points for the team. We had a lot of very good and very cool ideas, and we implemented them. We couldn't stop. The guys from design even wrote a paper. We have the document. Now, it's a crumpled piece of paper that says, "I promise, no more new features." Signed by the lead QA and the lead designer of the Halloween event. I think the guys eventually broke their promise. They still added something. Because it was hard to stop the current creativity. The team was strong and motivated, and because of that, we created very many things that we wanted to do. And we got lost in all this and couldn't stop in time. The development of the event was already in the final stretch, with everything ready in terms of gameplay and content. And we only had to fix bugs and game crashes. At one point, we noticed that we had a recurring issue, leading to the client crashing for about 1% of players. 1% may not seem like a lot, but we created a cooperative game mode for 5 players. And it's important for all 5 players to be playing, as the difficulty is tuned for 5 players. We received data that about 5 to 10% of all battles would end because of one player whose client crashed. The issue was with the texture. The texture of oil was almost never used in random battles. But in our mode, it was very frequent. It was a crash that was sort of buried for about 3 years in the main branch of the game. We didn't have much time to fix it. But sadly, we couldn't postpone Halloween anymore, because October was ending. And we made the very hard decision to move the game mode to the following year. When we were making the decision if we could or couldn't release, I was asked as the art QA engineer, "Victor, can you give any recommendations for the event release?" At that moment, you are divided as a person. The first person is someone who understands that a lot of work and ideas went into it. Your own ideas and your colleagues' ideas. But the other person, the engineer and someone who is working on the project, says that you can't release something like this. You go through all the stages. Yeah, denial, anger, acceptance. And then you have to, we have to, as leaders, as the management team, go to the development team. And it's hundreds of people. A huge number of people who dedicated their souls to it and were as engaged in it as possible. We had to go to them and say, "Guys, we didn't make it." And what's even harder, we had to go to the players with our decision. Halloween, even being unreleased, influenced the Road to Berlin event very much. We transferred parts of the technology from Halloween to this event. The more clever and aggressive bots with the various role models, and the understanding of how to create an interesting and action-packed battle, even on a small map. If not for Halloween, Road to Berlin would probably be a lot easier, worse, and would not have been liked as much. We sort of froze Halloween. We performed a number of technical exercises to make sure we could start working on it from spring of the following year. We knew that we would definitely continue working on it. Even though design promised only a few improvements, believe us, there are a lot. Meaning, the event from 2019 and the event from 2020 are in some sense different events. A lot of different features and mechanics were added. AI behavior was improved, and so on. This all has a sort of entirely alternative idea. This is a story that might have a continuation in the future. And we can build a large number of events on this idea. It's a sort of the other side of the World of Tanks coin. Development of Halloween became a real adventure for us, with unexpected twists, various experiments, eureka moments, and a whole lot of drama. At the end of Confrontation, a user under the name of Phoenix007, or something if I remember correctly, wrote on the forum that the next event should be on the Berlin map, and there must be SUs, ISUs, and the T-54, and they must confront the mouse. And when the event came out, the Road to Berlin game event, they must have said, hey, they took my idea, that's awesome. I'm saying this to remind you that we actually read the forums actively, communicate with the players, and read all of the feedback. And in reality, any of our game events, any feature in World of Tanks, is not just something that the guys at Wargaming came up with in a meeting. The guys read the forums, listened, watched, imagined how the audience would react, thought how large the audience is, how big of a share our players would like it, and if it was necessary. After all that, the decision is made if we are doing it or not. So please communicate with us, talk to us, write your comments on the forum, on social media, or in any available way. We will hear it, read it, and we are always grateful to you for your feedback.